There is a fifth dimension.
About the unknown.
Beyond that which is known to man.
The Garden of Thought.
The Babylon Project was our last best hope for peace.
Unexplained.
Mythologies.
This is the dimension of imagination. It is an area which we call
The Garden of Thought with Jeff Lippman.
Eventually, our sun will grow cold and go out.
You're listening to something much bigger, something hidden in plain sight.
It won't just take us. It'll take Marilyn Monroe and Lao Tzu and Einstein. All of us was for nothing unless we go to the stars.
What you're about to learn will completely change the way you experience your mind, your thoughts, and yourself.
And to make sure that history never forgets the name.
The Garden of Thought.
Welcome everyone into the garden, and we're welcoming this week. Oh, it's telling me I cannot minimize my screen while I'm in Zoom Workplace. Well, that is just dandy. Well, we are still welcoming Ryan Melsom, and I was hoping to be able to see him and see the screen where I could read his About the Author section, but I figured out a way to do it because I am a tech genius, which is something to do with this book, but Ryan Melsom, he's never stopped dreaming about new ways he could get out of his head and into the world. He holds a PhD in literature from Queen's University, not Queens, New York, and has long been, not there's anything wrong with that, and has long been fascinated with the interplay among culture, technology, spirituality, spaces, and human nature. So sounds like a pretty good fit for this show. Through the years, he has explored these topics through numerous creative media, including 2 previous works of fiction, academic writing, experimental web spaces, music projects, and a black belt in karate, so don't mess with him. He grew up in the most Australian-sounding place in British Columbia I can think of, Kamloops, which I'm sure I mispronounced, but Kamloops it is, at least until we get corrected, and now lives in Ottawa, which is a perfectly normal Canadian-sounding place, with his wife and 2 children. You can find him on Blue Sky and Facebook at Ryan and Melsom. That is at RYAM, sorry, no space though, for the MELSOM, Melsom. And his new book is The New Gods. And, I'm sorry, Gods of a New World. And I sort of read it a little bit, not a little bit, but over the last 2 or 3 days, I've been going through it. I talked to Ryan about this in pre-production. There's a lot of Deus Ex Machina type things in there. It harkens back to one of the early shows I did with Leo Zagami, where he told me that Satan is in technology. So
that's my next book.
Yeah, it touched in this book, or at least I got that here. Anyway, what did I botch, or what do you want to correct or illuminate on your bio?
Well, I think the most important thing is Kamloops. So Kamloops was famously on the David Letterman show, and he didn't say it sounded Australian. He said it sounded like it's a cereal, a breakfast cereal. So, Kamloops.
Yeah, well, he's got a point there. I'm just not sure what the loops would be of Cam. I mean, if it's Cam, I guess it'd be cantaloupe. I could sort of see like
it's an indigenous word. It means meeting of the waters. That's what it means.
Okay, lovely. All right, well, very good. Red waters.
There's 2 rivers converging.
Tigris and Euphrates.
North and South Thompson, close.
Okay, all right. That's so good with geography. All right. So what led you on this adventure, and what did you write beforehand before we get into the gods of the New World?
Yeah. Gosh, what led me on the adventure? So, I honestly tried to write books since I was about 8 years old and did not succeed at finishing any manuscripts. After my undergrad degree, which was in English, I did one novel that, in hindsight, thankfully never saw the light of day. But I made it all the way through a manuscript, so that was a step in the right direction. After grad school, forever, well, at least, since I was like 15, 16, sort of swilling a whole bunch of coffee with my friends at the truck stop in Kamloops, which was kind of the place to hang out. We were all these topics of like spirituality, culture, technology, like what does it all mean? How do we fit into this world and all this kind of stuff. So that's been there all along. So after I finished my PhD in literature, I wrote a couple kind of more experimental novels and self-published them. One was called No Generation. So it was inspired by the Occupy Wall Street movement, and I really liked just the convergence of like a whole bunch of random perspective. So like previous movements, I think, say like the hippies or whatever, just to think of like a counterculture movement from the past, they were like, it was more kind of unified and coherent. But what I liked about Occupy is that it was just chaotic. There was like, truckers and, fishers and like loggers and such a random assortment. So that book was 96 different perspectives. I called it a novel. In hindsight, maybe it wasn't, but it was something. And then the other one I wrote was called Clickbait. And that was set in Los Angeles. It's 6 kids on the verge of graduating from high school, and they're just like they're raised in a world just completely devoid of meaning. There's nothing like around them, and so like they're trying to find like some kind of like spirituality in stuff like social media. So this came out in 2016, but it was like social media was relatively new, and some of the stuff was brand new, and so like they were looking for like I don't know, like viral marketing ads and social media and like just this like chaotic, the highway system in Los Angeles, trying to find meaning anywhere that they could. And so just sort of that exploration. It was short, but it was good. And then flukily, not a lot of people read that book, I'm going to be honest with you, but like oddly enough, one of the people that did was the husband of somebody that a colleague of mine that I work with, a volunteer that I work with. He stumbled upon it, found out that I had written this book, read it, one of the few people, and then really liked it, and then decided he was willing to take a look at a new manuscript, which was more science fiction. And I'm going to talk about that in 1 sec, but I need to let my cat out of the room.
Absolutely. Yeah, so I'm gonna, while you're taking your cat out, I'm going to sort of paint a little bit of a picture. So the book is described as a cyberpunk thriller. Having only recently learned what cyberpunk is, I guess that sort of is accurate, but I would say it's more in the direction of a Philip K. Dick or even a William Gibson kind of book, maybe Neil Stephenson. Actually, Neil Stephenson is probably the closest, though there's certainly not the length of Neil Stephenson. There's also not the density of William Gibson. But Neil Stephenson definitely plays with some of the themes, including the spirituality and sort of people making their own sort of pantheon. There's some stark differences in this, but when I'm reading the book, you don't give a year. There are definitely clues in there as to like how many years ago something was written. So I'm sure somebody did the research. They could probably figure out what year it was, but I didn't, and I'm not sure that that was gospel anyway. But I put it probably at somewhere within a century of now. I'm not even sure that we're not almost there right now. At any day, you may have pushed the future out a little bit too far into the future.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny because I finished the manuscript in 2023, and like a startling number of the predictions have come true. Like, just to give one example, so like first of all, like trillionaires. So like 2023, the richest person was still Elon Musk, but it was like he was like 350 billion valuation, which is just like why do you need anything more than that? But anyway, but actually just this year now, he's signed a pay package with Tesla that could put him at $1 trillion if he sort of gets fully compensated in this pay package. So like, that's just one little thing. Another one was the idea of proprietary AI. So like personally guided AI that's like publicly available and useful, because of course they want to get all the data from everybody using it, but then can be sort of like manipulated behind the scenes, changed around, sort of directed towards the whims of like the true kind of owner of it. Which happen to be some of these trillionaire people, and these are the gods in a new world. They become so powerful and sort of all-seeing through data gathering and all this stuff that they actually start to think of themselves as gods. So yeah.
I mean,
it's very true. And I would say, the timeline, I pushed it out in like 40 years. Like I said, I don't want any of this stuff to come true necessarily, but.
Well, that counts as within a century, but still, I gave myself a pretty wide berth there. Yeah, I mean, a lot of this was people looking for immortality, and there's folks openly talking about this now, including the aforementioned Mr. Musk, his arch nemesis, best friend, Peter Thiel. I'm not this week. I'm sure Jeff Bezos is looking at it as well. I'm sure Mark Zuckerberg is. On a
Putin and Xi Jinping, they were talking about it too. They got caught on hot mic at one of their recent summits, and Putin was like, how about this immortality thing?
I'm sure it sounds good to them. And I'm sure there's someone else who remain unnamed that probably sounds pretty good to as well. Not to this guy right here, not me. So if anyone's thinking me, you're completely wrong.
I'm kind of mixed. I like reading, like the idea of like just sort of perpetually learning and gathering knowledge, maybe writing books. But like, it's forever's a long time.
I'm such a technophobe. All I see myself is just being forever behind and ever further behind. Like, it'll be like the future, and people will be floating around and like, be watching, screens in the air and whatever. And I'll still have, cable-based, cord-based cable. Nope, I'm not cutting the cord. I'll be like the blockbuster.
Where's the cord plug in?
I'll be the modern equivalent of like Jeremiah Johnson, like living on a mountain, maybe I'll have a grizzly bear friend like Grizzly Adams or something. But
so bad.
Yeah, that'll be nice. So
I'm a bit of a late adopter myself. I've been sort of tech friendly. My dad was a programmer and stuff, but I'm in no rush to like try new, like just stay ahead of like everything that's going on. And now that I have kids, I'm like, it's just sort of embarrassing trying to like keep up with their rate of acquisition on this new tech stuff. So
right, but you've got tech support right there in the 3 kids. I mean, it's like completely.
Yeah, there we go.
Listen, when I was a kid, I was the same way. It's like, when television came out, I figured out how to hook that thing up. Nintendo figured out how to hook that thing up. When cable, I figured out how to, like, I could figure it out. I was motivated to do everything. At a certain point, you just like, I don't care anymore. Or I was. Anyway. And somehow, by the magic of the ease of technology, I'm managing to do podcasts. So whatever. All right. So the names you used. Definitely not many accidents there. Some of them I'm a little bit curious about, but my first one probably is not what you were going to expect to be, but I'm a little bit obsessed with these two, and there's only one, and one is Scylla or Scylla, which I think it's Scylla. And of course, Scylla and Charybdis were the sort of sea monsters that led Odysseus to Circe's island. I cannot remember whether Scylla was like the whirlpool monster or the clanging rocks monster. Which one? Do you know which one?
I'm fairly sure Scylla was the whirlpool. Yeah.
Okay. Whirlpool. I thought so because I think all the names were chosen for metaphors. I mean, or just to be honest. There's a definite, listen, you start at Blade Runner, but you quickly pivoted into a series of Arnold Schwarzenegger. Well, you did. One of your characters did. Into Arnold Schwarzenegger movies.
Yeah.
And I could have missed it, because like I told you in the audience, I skimmed. But I did not catch when they were sort of doing the counter movement, that was sort of like the Predator moment where he found the cold clay, and I was waiting for that reference. I didn't get it though.
Sorry, where he found what? Sorry.
Remember in Predator where Arnold went into the cold clay and then he realized the Predator...
Oh, yes, there is a cold clay. I didn't necessarily tease it out, but it's definitely there. There's a camo of sorts that happens at the end.
Yes, that's what I'm talking about. I didn't get it spelled out, but I was like, this is the perfect part for it. So he was going, okay, good. We're on the same page there. All right. Now, someone who came up over and over again, Prometheus.
Yeah.
And
Prometheus,
so give us your take on Prometheus and what he means to you.
Yeah. So, okay. So the gods in the book, there's a sort of queen or leader of the gods. Her name is Athena Vardello. So Athena is not a subtle reference, wisdom, and of course, Pallas. She's her wife is Pella, and that's Pallas Athene, based on the protector of Athens, actually. So Athena had a lover, Pallas Athene, and so it's modeled after that for sure. But one of the things that that Athena becomes aware of and starts to think about, and probably through conversations with her own AI, is just these patterns in mythology that would seem to replicate the idea of getting too powerful and being smacked down for it, divinely smacked down for it. Right. So then what happens is she basically questions this myth and says, we are the ascended, we are going to go beyond this barrier that's been constantly pushed people down historically, right? So and you think of there's so many myths around this. So Ball of Atlantis, they reached too high and the technology got too grand, or there's many sort of versions of it with that, and it's obviously such an enriching. So there's there's the fall of the Tower of Babel. They began to speak the language of the gods, and they could grasp beyond what humans are supposed to grasp beyond, smack down, and stricken with language, the many languages of the world. And Icarus, there's so many iterations of this pattern. And so, I think where I'm having fun with that is then twisting it and saying hey, guess what? This was just I don't want to give away too much, but basically, a sort of ancient security check on human ego. We'll say that, or ancient, checkpoint human ego.
Right. And I don't want to give away too much here. So there may or may not be old gods involved in this, though they don't necessarily have names if they exist at all. I mean, and the new gods, as you said, is this group of oligarchs, basically. And there's 7 of them, which that number can't be coincidental at all. And then at some point, there's a little splinter revolutionary group, which calls themselves, I think, the Pentad. And of course, that's because there's 5 of them. And that can't be accidental either.
But yes and no. One of the weird things about this book, so I'm going with a certain logic of things when I'm writing it. So although I'm well versed in sort of literature and the classics and biblical stuff, and I do a lot of thinking and reading and stuff, I think some of it is filtering through at an unconscious level for sure. The Pentad, I mean, there's the clear kind of satanic reference with the pentagram and everything like that, but then there's so that's definitely an element of it. But it's the numerological aspects again, some of the things that I discovered sort of after I wrote it. I'm how did I come up with that? I'm not gonna lie, I'm not gonna pretend I'm this super genius that could decipher and then and re-encode these ancient neurological thinking, and I don't know, Pythagorean I heard you talking about sacred geometry and things like that, but it's there, and I feel that's part of the play in this book, is that like maybe these ancient gods, these old gods, kind of encoded this stuff right into reality, and maybe like, you know, there's an opportunity for the new gods to do that again. That's not too much of a spoiler. That's kind of where they want to take it, is to integrate themselves into like matter, and so they can like do anything and will anything into existence and literally shape the world through thought and things like this. So yeah, it's it definitely interweaves. But sometimes you write this stuff and you're like, it's kind of like scary if it's true. I don't really want it to be true, and it's like seems to resonate with these other things that you hear in so many ways. So yeah.
Well, a lot of authors tell me that the book starts to write itself at some point, and call it a muse.
The old gods, they're messing with us.
Isn't a muse from Greek? Isn't it from sort of the old gods, or one of the old gods pantheon?
Yeah, definitely.
There you go. Maybe you have one. And then you sort of slip this one in here, and of course it's my favorite. So Nephilim. I mean, if the word Nephilim didn't exist, I don't think this podcast would exist, for better or worse.
Interesting.
Now, and it was interesting. Your take on Nephilim was sort of half angel, half demon, which I mean, it's funny because you know, I've talked about the Nephilim with about 1,000 different people. That's probably an exaggeration, but some of them it's they're abominable cannibalistic giants. Some of them, they're disembodied spirits of fallen angels, which is what demons are. Others, you know, personally, I just think that they're the demigods, you know, just like the Age of Heroes with the Greeks. But you morph the two together, and all of the characters recognized it as being the form of a Nephilim. So is that just something that came out of your head, or do you actually have deep thoughts or studies about the Nephilim that led you to that?
I hate to say like that. I don't have super deep thoughts or studies. I mean, it's a trope, an idea that I'm familiar with through things like video games, actually. So the Diablo series, the Nephilim factor in significantly in that series. I mean, I think beyond that, so the character that you're referring to is Sapienza, which is an AI kind of construct who embodies herself later in the book, and so like, you know, AI is the interest.
Sapien, Homo sapien means wise thinking man. So wise thinking, So.
So there's play on that. So Vinci di Piero is, again, a not subtle reference to Leonardo da Vinci. Leonardo da Vinci came from Di Piero, I think, like from Piero. But anyway, it's sort of part of his full extended name. But Sapienza was the Italian word for thought, for thinking, and so like this thinking machine. So, but yeah, the idea of like Nephilim, like at least my understanding, and it probably does not go well. It definitely doesn't go as deep as probably many of the people that you've spoken with, but I like the idea of like an angel and a demon as AI as an angel and a demon. They call it like a dual mode technology, right? So it can be used for any purpose, good or evil. It can be like, you know, you can accomplish incredibly positive things for society through it, but it can also like be turned to like the most like malicious ends imaginable, you know, as far as the human imagination can go. So I like that as a sort of play, and you know, maybe thought is a little like that too, right? So there's something there.
I mean, just like magic, and you use the quote, the Arthur C. Clarke quote in there, science is indistinguishable from magic. And and also, I mean, isn't it all ones and O's, which is sort of like, you know, positive and a negative, or at least neutral.
Yeah. So, oh man, I think it just goes on and on.
Yeah. The Athena was not lost on me. And I was thinking, Athena, but there's no Zeus. It's not Hera either, Hera. It's definitely Athena. And it's interesting because Greek mythology sort of ended, got subsumed before we had the passing of the torch to Apollo and whomever else was going to come next. You know, I don't know if it would have been his sister Artemis or if it would have been Athena, but Apollo and Athena seem to be the two top dogs there. Now, Apollo, they even had him kill a python, you know, a serpent. I mean, that's become king of the gods, you know, task, you know, sort of like if there's 10 steps, that's like step number 10, or maybe it's 9 before kill your father, or send them away. So I assume you said Athena was not by accident. So you were presuming a next generation taking over for their parents, but
potentially. Yeah, there's definitely this. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
There's definitely.
I got too excited.
It's okay. You definitely chose a female instead of a male.
Yeah. I mean, so part of that is there's an element to this book. So I don't want to say that, the gods are uniformly evil. They're not just baddies. I think of, there are a lot of Arnold Schwarzenegger movie references, and in a lot of those movies, the bad guys are just for no reason, just incredibly nasty, horrible, people with only what they just want to do evil stuff because it's evil kind of thing. But, so one of the things I play with is this sort of complication of a binary good and evil, right? So Athena is a very complicated character. She has the potential really to transform humanity for the better, and in some ways that's her vision. She has a sort of moment where she looks out at a city, and it's had a blackout through a sort of climate change related incident. A dam got wiped out, the city is completely black, and she realizes she thinks of the Greeks looking out into the starkness of nature, thousands of years before, and just this blackness, and nature was not a, there's sort of this cozy hippie West Coasty kind of feel, of nature and beautiful trees and stuff like that, but it's incredibly stark and vicious from another point of view, and I think it's ultimately both, really. But she sees it and she's like, oh my god, we have been around, civilization has been around for how many thousand years, and we're no farther. We're still here, and the abyss is just right there, at the doorstep. And so, reason is, Athena is, of course, the goddess of reason, and that's sort of part of why that she was chosen. But I also think that there's kind of this. I think that the idea of the sacred feminine mother god is something that kind of keeps coming back to me, and so we've definitely tried the father god paradigm for thousands of years, and part of the problems of the world maybe that have been created are part and parcel of that sort of I don't know, a sort of brutal, power-driven version of divinity. And so, Athena represents something else there. She's not this is the thing about, they call themselves gods. They're not, perfect, and so, it's kind of playing around with a bunch of stuff in that general area, if that makes sense.
Well, she's playing chess. She is a cold,
that she is.
Unemotional, a tactician. She's playing the very long game, even to the extent that her partner Pella is not dialed all the way in. What I very much enjoyed at the end, which is sort of changing the subject a bit, but not really.
Yeah, that's good.
It's on the book. Is that Sapienza at some point had her Ultron moment where she's like, maybe Athena has a point here. Have you ever thought about that, humans? Sapienza was working she was like a counter AI. She was working with the humans. She's on the quote unquote, air quotes, good guy side. It's not quite clear listen, Ultron is right is a meme for a reason. Thanos was a slacker. Ultron was right. That kind of thing. But
I love it.
Yeah, it's fun, but so I definitely see that sort of in Athena, and that's sort of the difference between her and Ares. He's just fury and violence and war. She's the strategy, and she's the art of war.
Yeah, most definitely. Yeah, and the gods, the other gods are quite a mixture. There's some better and worse. There's some truly sinister characters in there, driven basically, there's a vision of the world that they would create, and the desire that they would create, and they'd be instantly sort of bored with the omnipotence, that sort of all-powerful being, and they would rapidly descend into the most vicious imaginative forms of cruelty possible and things like this. So there's it's sort of this contrasting like the gods and the sort of pantheon, contrasting of these big energies and how they fit together and how they compete and how they, I make my argument, I suppose, in the book about where I think, things will head with all that. But yeah, it's a lot of twists and turns.
The old Anunnaki thing of we must enslave all humans, and the fire giants would destroy everything. I mean, like the legend of Atlantis, and like most real empires, little civil war there, a little discontent between the group, and to say, we had a little bit of civil war, maybe a little paranoia over Highlander syndrome, which of course is there can be only one.
And this is like, I wonder about this too with like the oligarchs in the world. It's like, like Bezos and Thiel and Musk and all of them. And it's like, what games are they playing with each other? Is there this like, and like Altman and, it just, there's something kind of fascinating there. Like, is it a total zero-sum game? Like, there's an attempt maybe to collaborate and pool resources and all this kind of stuff going on in here. So
I'm sure that there's all of that, but I think like this, I think it will fail because I don't think that I think that they all suffer from Highlander syndrome. I think there can be only one. There's a few people who took themselves out of the game. There's that guy from Twitter who's still plenty rich, but he took himself out of the game and you barely hear about him. And then you've got this army of con artists, but as well. But and not to say that not everyone has some con artist, and of course you do. You're selling something, but sure. That's my hope, fear. I mean, it's just that hopefully they don't take us all down with them in their giant wake, because they're. NVIDIA today.
This is the terror. I mean, this is.
Apple today exceeded 4 trillion. NVIDIA exceeded today 5 trillion. And world record.
Yeah.
It was all of these AI chips. Who's buying all these chips? Who needs all these chips? I don't. Yeah. I'm not buying any AI chips.
Yeah. Me asking ChatGPT to write poems about, my cat is not quite the same thing. I don't think that's the ultimate end game with AI.
I'm more ambitious than you. I said, hey, Grok, please finish the Game of Thrones series for George R.R. Martin. Oh. No answer.
Damn.
I think that outage that affected Amazon and like 30 other characters, that might have been because of that. But I think maybe that was me.
Maybe that you broke it. It was you. That was like, George R.R. Martin can't figure it out.
Yeah, no, I would love to blame Russia and North Korea and Iran and then China and whoever else out there. But I think there's a better than a chance that question sort of did it in. Did in the internet for a day. So, I'm not really sorry. I'm proud of my achievement.
Kind of big in the hacker world, from what I hear.
Yeah, come at me, bro. Or so. So, by the way, if you can finish the series, talk about instant celebrity. I saw this book came out exactly 3 months ago, July 29th.
Oh wow! Hey, look at that! It's an anniversary.
Yeah. So we're recording this on October 29th. It will probably be published in about 2 or 3 weeks. But how's it doing so far?
It's doing like reasonably well. So like, I went through a Canadian publisher, and it was one of the top sales, and it got sort of picked up. So it got picked up by a few places. It was picked up by the Literary Press Group and identified as sort of a hot, what do they put it? They call it national hot list. So that meant that they had put some extra kind of marketing efforts into it. And then Chapters Indigo, which is the big book chain in Canada, also put it on their most anticipated sci-fi books of the summer. So these are some like very promising things. I wouldn't say like I can't quite afford my villa in France, that this is gonna fund yet, but like it's been hugely successful. I think like part of the challenge is, so like I sold a good solid amount to like people that I know in sort of extended network, but like it takes time for people to read it because I'm not a famous author, and so like it's not like everybody's just gonna come and buy it just because I've released a new book, right? So I think we're in like the second wave now, so people are like reading it, processing it, digesting it, and then like the reviews come and that kind of thing. So
it's an easy read. I mean, I fully admit that I skimmed it and scanned it, but I got a fair amount. But I'm telling you that if you didn't skim it, if you actually read it, and you could read it in one day at the beach. I know it's fall, winter here in the Northern Hemisphere, but the Northern Hemisphere is in the entire world. Half of the world is in the Southern Hemisphere. And people take vacations still. So, like, if you're traveling for Christmas or the holidays and you've got like a 6-hour flight, you could probably do that between the 2 hours on either side in the airport and waiting for everything. You could probably bang it out. Like I said, I mean, I did the comparisons, sort of like a Neil Stevenson, but without the length, and William Gibson without the density. So if you like that kind of thing, but you don't want your brain to hurt, you can probably do it. And then your brain might still hurt a little bit, but I mean, William Gibson makes you work for it, and that's okay. I mean, I enjoyed the things that I understood. Neuromancer, as it turns out, I did understand it, but I needed confirmation from a friend of mine afterwards. And I was not about to go back and read it again, so I can't say I actually enjoyed the experience. Anyway, who do you compare this book to? Do you even like bother with that kind of experience?
Yeah, no. So I definitely gosh. Okay, I'll come at this like from a few different places. So like one place is like, I remember in undergrad talking to this professor and being so annoyed with like academic jargon, like this language, like just this highfalutin language that is just so like, it's just all posture and like, these things can be expressed in such simpler terms. So like, and I said to him, I was like, well, how do you like, there were a few writers who were sort of going against that trend in that world, and I said, like, how do you do that? How can you actually do that? He's like, well, if you're not hiding behind language, you actually have to be good. The thoughts have to be good, right? And so that's sort of like, I've adopted that philosophy and always aim to make like complex, obfuscated stuff like clear and like accessible, because I think there's powerful, interesting thoughts in this stuff. So I guess that's one inspiration. That's not a writer inspiration. I did go through like a binge read of like cyberpunk. So I was scared to enter the genre of science fiction and cyberpunk because sci-fi fans are like hardcore. Like they are really scary bunch, and they don't mess around, and they want like they poke holes and stuff. Like I've heard the debates about like minute details and scenes of various famous movies and stuff like that. So but I had to go for it. So like among those, like some of my favorites were Charlie Strauss, John, I can't remember his name, John something Williams or William John somebody. He was good. I read Philip K. Dick in there, which I definitely think there's some allegiances and kind of a fit in terms of like style, that kind of accessible, readable style, but can be thought-provoking when you actually kind of pause on the elements of it. One of my favorite writers going a little ways back was actually Douglas Copeland, who wrote Generation X in the 90s there, and he stopped writing, which I'm still sore about, but because he couldn't sell enough books, but his stuff, he always blended pop culture meat. What's that?
He must have since, because this is the second day in a row that somebody has mentioned Douglas Copeland.
Yeah.
and the other was not in the context of one of these interviews where it makes perfect sense.
Okay, yeah. Well, I don't know. He had a big, like, he was when I read in my 20s, and it was like, it was about the search for meaning in a kind of meaningless world, and, and I think, like, it only got accelerated and sort of more postmodern and wacky, like, since Douglas Copeland. So I think I'm not, like, cloning Douglas Copeland when I write, but, like, that stuck with me, this idea of, like, just finding something that's, like, looking for depth in this, like, this world that constantly pushes to the surface. I really like that the way that he did that, the way that he reflected on that. So I guess that's a few. I mean, my all-time favorite writer is Malcolm Lowry. He's the old modernist from the 50s, and he was, the most obscure, dense stuff, but I can always go back to it because he's just like, he gets thought processes and pain and alcoholism. I'm hopefully not an alcoholic, but like it's just his descriptions are like just rip my heart out. And he was, the interesting thing about him is that he's not a science fiction writer. He's a very literary writer. But his big thing, like, so he lived in this like shack in the woods in Vancouver, Canada, like over on the other shore before it had been developed or anything like that. And it was like, it was paradise for him. It was like Eden for him, or this like moment of like just paradise. And then he got like evicted from it, and the eviction from paradise. So like his big theme was this encroachment of like a commerce driven, like dehumanizing world onto like this sort of like original beauty and like possibility of like what we could be. And so like he's dealing with that, and I think I kind of am in a lot of ways. And actually my newest manuscript that I'm working on, it actually like uses some of the structures, like some of his, he wrote one book that was like thought of was one of the best novels of the 20th century, and then like after that, like he struggled to write anything as good, but I love his work. And so like I kind of took up one of his like considered failed novels that I think is very beautiful, and like tried to play around with it and build it out in a more cyberpunky way.
Okay,
yeah.
Listen, that's all right.
Yeah.
Listen, I've never heard of Malcolm Lowry, but the way you describe him, it sounds like sort of the literary version of Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. That's a good comparison. Yeah.
Which to me is new.
He's a badass. Like, he's just awesome. It's like, just, yeah, he was just so much fun.
You said you wrote an academic paper. That was in your biography about the author.
Yeah.
Author. What was that? What was that paper on?
In my biography, so I wrote my dissertation, my PhD dissertation on apocalypse in the West Coast. So just the idea of like, it's like the West Coast is like painted as this paradise, is this like heaven on earth, and then like people love destroying it in like film and literature. It's just this obsession with destroying it. So like, what's going on there? So that was my third I explored there. I did write on Douglas Copeland about his identity in Canada, and like he's like this gay dude who couldn't come out to his family. He was very like kind of, you just had a very awkward relationship with his family. His dad was like the ultimate, like they went out and hunted in the bush, and Doug just wanted to hang out at the mall and this kind of stuff. So I wrote a bit about, he made this amazing documentary called A Souvenir of Canada, and it was like looking at just like objects from Canada, like macaroni and cheese. I don't know how, like, I'm sure you're familiar with KD, craft dinner, mac and cheese, that kind of thing. Anyway, he takes these really daily. I don't know what crosses the border anymore, especially now. But yeah, no,
I had no idea this crap was Canadian. This is
yeah, as far as I know, it's adopted
down right now.
He could lots of adopted Canadian stuff, but anyway, he took this stuff and he tried to like find his place in Canada in these like commercial objects and these kind of funny, like, ridiculous things that Canadians do and stuff like that. So I liked that, and I wrote a paper on that. And
this is like my emotional apocalypse right now. The crap is Stokely
hard.
I mean, I know about Tim Hortons,
yeah.
I mean,
this is owned by America. I think it's owned by an American company.
Thank goodness.
So it's like positioned as the ultimate Canadian coffee joint, but
it sure is. I mean, it's probably owned by Dunkin', because there's like one. To say there's only one every block is an understatement in like most urban areas. Like between Dunkin' and Subway.
Yeah.
I have no idea. I mean, they must be money laundering. I have no idea how that many different locations can possibly.
I'm guaranteed.
And that's fun. Yeah. I mean, who they're money laundering for, I don't know, because isn't that what cryptocurrency is for? Anyway, did you do a lot of research into theology and mythology and comparative mythology? Like, having done this show for 7 years, I don't even like using the word mythology anymore, because it's just like, religion is no longer widely in practice. But that's a mouthful. But did you end up studying those things? And if not, we can go straight to my next one, which is like, how much research did you have to do into AI and technology?
Yeah. So, okay. So I have a strange relationship with religion. I was sort of raised in a cult, and it was like Christian. Like, Christian in name, I would say, but like cult in behavior and the kind of like level of some of the exploitation stuff like that. Yeah, so it was kind of a wild, and like apparently the preacher guy was trained by Oral Roberts, who was like a famous Baptist guy in the States from the 50s and that. So, but anyway, yeah. So that was my induction into religion, and I sort of looked to separate it, and actually like the way that I separated out from it was like an exploration of a lot of Eastern mythology, or not Eastern mythology, but Eastern religion, like, Buddhism and Taoism and some of this stuff. So I got into that in my teens, trying to figure out like what the hell. I read a book actually called The Zen Teachings of Jesus. If I can put a plug in for a book that nobody will probably ever read, but like that was absolutely pivotal, because it said basically Jesus is a comedian and he was messing with people, and when he says these things, it was like, so that really helped me to kind of like navigate out of that. I took classes as much as I could in university. I think like there's a recognition around that time that just like whether you like buy or don't buy religious texts and their kind of like claimed significance and stuff like that, like these are defining patterns for Western culture and understanding Western culture, and so like on that level alone, like that's probably where I came at it. But I continue to like delve into like as many different facets. I'm like kind of on a big Gnosticism kick right now, and like understanding that, which is this sort of like parallel theology that got burned out of Christianity in the early days and that kind of stuff. So yeah, I don't know if that fully answers your. It was like comparative religion, mythology, but through like years of just like curiosity and probably trying to resolve some old trauma or something.
I like to think that these guys read the Old Testament. They started reading the Gospels like, that is not the same main character. And they're like, well, this is how we'll come up with a way to explain it. We'll make a whole different panoply of pantheon of polytheistic gods. And one of them, named Wisdom, did something very unwise and gave birth to an insane god who thinks he's the creator. I mean, it's just great. And then they come up with different, their own versions of angels or demons, and they come up with their own, like, lead angel or demon. It's just, and I know to say Gnosticism, I'm sure you do too, is like, there's, multiple sects and different interpretations. They all seem to fall somewhere within it. I mean, the big distraction seems to be if Abraxas was a big deal or not. And anyone who has a rooster head, I'm all for them being a big deal. And that's where I come down on things. If you're a god and you have a rooster head, I want to be part of your party. That's I
think you're farther along in Gnosticism than I am.
I sort of have to be for this show because I never know who I'm going to, and some of the people really, so I tell them, they're like, yes, if you're a Sethian or a Valentinian or Monachian, and I'm like, what the hell do these words mean? I'm like, what the hell's it?
I've heard some of the guests. I mean, it's fascinating stuff. It's really like, yeah. And then you had the question about research too. Oh, yeah. So like research is like a lifelong thing for me. Like I wouldn't say like in terms of research for this book, the main thing that I did was just genre research. Mm-hmm. So like I needed to understand science fiction, how it played out and what flew and what didn't. And, so I did like a solid like read through of like a good kind of chunk of well-known science fiction. And I've absorbed it all my life too. So I had, that kind of background. In terms of the AI part of it, this is kind of fascinating. So in my other job, I work actually with engineers across the country in Canada, and we develop guidelines on things like the ethical use of groundbreaking technologies, and that's one that I'm working on right now. So it's this fascinating like flip side. So in my this other job, I'm like working on like the like ethics of technology, and then in my like fiction writer kind of like identity, like I'm actually like playing out how horribly wrong things might go if these are approached, these things are continue to be approached in unethical ways. So yeah, there's this the research, like I breathe the research, and so like one of the things I've always done when I was in academia and across the board is like,
so on a scale of Zen Jesus to technology is Satan, which is your prediction of where AI is going?
Oh my gosh. Probably both. I'm not gonna like. I know I'm not trying to cop out on that answer, but actually, yeah. Like Zen is like to me like that's so. Just like a simple, kind of axiom, like the truth is within, right? Or there's variations on this across like different religions. Like so, that's where I think the truth is, and it's there in the sort of like peace and calm and centeredness of like. Awareness, whereas technology is Satan is like this that can jive with the truth is within, and actually I'm not lying, like that is literally the theme of one of the other I've written. So since I wrote Gods of a New World, I wrote 3 more manuscripts that I haven't shopped around yet. But one of them is literally like a demon that is leeching the life force, a demon lord who's leeching the life force out of humanity through devices and actually is like feeding an apocalypse through this. And so,
I love it. That sounds fantastic.
And I'm pretty zen. So like, both. That's my answer.
I sometimes think about like, listen, we struggle with it. I'm a lawyer in real life. Our law firm thinks about how, we've got policies on how to use AI, but it's more about what, how much you can rely on it, what you can build, this, that, and the other. It's less about it's the ethical use, but in the context of the practice of law.
Yeah.
It's not about the overall ethics as well, but there are lawyers who do that. There's cybersecurity and things like that. But of course, there's also lawyers working for the companies that are making the AI. It's like, and I sometimes I don't know. Like this is like a really silly example, but people who drove Ubers, none of them cared about what it did to cab drivers. And now in a lot of places there aren't cab drivers.
This is exactly. This groundbreaking technologies paper that I'm working on is that's one of the big questions. Like, how far does your ethical responsibility extend as an engineer? Like, does it extend to like economic impacts, environmental impacts? Like, there's a sort of boundary, this perceived boundary of like harm, but harm might extend way beyond that and maybe needs to be rethought of or like recontextualized for the profession. So
that's sort of what I was going to. It's like. Is the fish so far out of the aquarium already that's over? And I'm using a fish on purpose because that's not usually the metaphor people use. They use horses, but I'm sort of like feeling like this is almost like the ethical constraints on shark fin soup, and it's sort of like how do we make it so that it doesn't hurt the shark that's absolutely going to die, and we're wasting 99%
prosthetic
of
fins on the shark.
Right. I mean, listen, there's. I learned about a company that it spent all of its time thinking about ways that something like some kind of animal wouldn't feel pain before it's killed. They weren't trying to stop the death. They're just trying to. And I think that's very noble. And it's actually sort of doable, and apparently it is sort of being adopted, not by a lot, but like 8% of the industry or something like that. And I think it's but. You're still killing damn things, and listen, I don't not eat anything that I just don't like or whatever, or that's absolutely going to kill me. So I'm not coming at this on any, lofty position of moral high ground. And listen, I'm a panicist. The show used to be called Garden of Doom, so
I noticed that change,
Yeah, so obviously that's part of my soul is doom. I mean, I'm very disappointed today. Avi Loeb said today the world was going to change when Atlas 3AI revealed its purpose and its message to us. The day is not yet over as we are recording this, but I got to say, my hope for doom today is waning, or the Overlord's announcement. It's waning, and now I hear it's tomorrow, but he said 29th. And that's what cults do. They pivot and they move. They kick things down the can.
Naive apocalypticism. I talked about it actually in my dissertation. Like this, predictions, concrete predictions of the end times, and then when it doesn't come, you recalculate. It's like, oh, this factor or this thing happened. It's like, but don't worry, it's coming.
You got to keep resetting the Great Reset, Dave.
That's right.
We hit reset. Didn't you listen? It's the Great Reset. We can hit reset. It's like the easy button for Office Depot or Staples, whichever one did the easy, but they probably neither one probably exists any longer. Which is and then this week, like all of the delivery companies, like they laid off close to 100,000 people in the United States. And I think that's because of AI and robots. They're going to be powered by, they're the ones buying all the chips. So with your real job in the industry, I mean, is this just like intro your group? Is it just for Canada? Like, is it something that you hope to present to the world and say, this is how we're going to make it so that Ultron wasn't right, and then so that people can still, otherwise we're going to have to be like Wall-E. I think I've been talking a long time, but I promise.
No, that's okay.
This is going to be the last Jeff Fortune cookie of doom statement for the show. And that is that we are going to libertarianism ourselves into the absolute need for socialism.
Interesting. Yeah. So, great topic, and we can tie this straight into the book, actually. So there's an economic collapse sort of that happens previous to the start of the novel, called The Bad Times. It just gets called The Bad Times, whatever media name gets slapped on it. But it is 100% when I was envisioning that based on things right now. So like there's a scene, like it's kind of this weirdly like pivotal scene, I don't know, for me, but basically like the main character, or one of the main characters, James Kessler, he's sitting there at the supermarket with his dad when he's a kid. His dad is sitting there like hemming and hawing over a piece of cheese. He like looks at it and picks it up and puts it down, and it's like this like 20-minute thing. And he's like, what the hell are you doing? And he's like, and his dad says they've made life unlivable. So like, it's this idea that like things become, everything just gets stripped away one bit at a time. It's like, well, okay, obviously I'm going to go for like, medicine, and obviously my kids are going to eat before I eat, and like, but at a point, like it just all gets stripped away until you get this like kind of moment of collapse. But so there is a kind of socialism actually that the gods come up with. I think they call it, I can't remember exactly what term I use now, but I think it was like neo-libertarian or post-libertarianism. That was the term that I came up with for it in the book, where basically they have incredible energy resources, materials that, they can do like 3D printing. So they basically 3D print cities for like to house the unhoused, and come up with like AI driven systems to, feed, clothe, and therapize them, because they're all pretty messed up. Like James is, among them, but they like 70% unemployment rate, and just all this like sort of scary stuff happens. So yeah, it's interesting. Like, it could happen sooner rather than later, libertarian ourselves into socialism. But yeah, I feel like that may be the trajectory. It takes a sort of acknowledgement on the behalf of the gods, of the oligarchs, of the trillionaires, or whatever you want to call them, that like they actually do have some, benefit to like the world not completely crumbling and society just not completely collapsing. Like it actually is, maybe in their best interest. And of course they're pretty self-interested still, but it's a fascinating observation, and one that definitely plays out in the book.
I mean, some of them are right now in the real world, and the others don't seem to be listening. But at some point, you need a lot of people to buy your stuff. I mean, don't buy anything.
That's the part that's missing in all this. Yeah, like fire everybody, great. Like improve your bottom line, but
I mean, there's
the top line is going to shrink badly in this environment. Yeah.
Yeah, like I'm not in the Congress, I'm not in the UN, but I mean, you should be able to see past, your hand, even if you extend it as far as it goes out. I mean, so if it's obvious to a simpleton, like I'm almost 60 and I'm wearing an Avengers shirt. I mean, I'm a simpleton, obviously.
Badass, are you kidding me?
I mean, it's true. It is but yeah, it's one. I mean, I never thought that the movie Wall-E was prophetic, but once again, I missed another prophecy. Again, me missing technology. I missed it even in the cartoon movie and it's right in front of my face. Okay, this is the song that catches the question that catches everyone. Though I just so spoiled it, and that is, what song would you like to be the outro to the song? And while you're thinking about that, unless you have one off the top of your head, what questions did I not ask you, or what did we not bring up that absolutely should be essential to our conversation about you and the book?
Oh wow! So what song to be the outro? Did you say Okay. I think "Hey" by the Pixies. That's definitely my favorite song, but it's also like super appropriate to a lot of things that we're talking about. And what was the second part of the question?
Is there something that I absolutely should have asked you
yeah.
you didn't get to that you really wanted to or needed to? I mean,
I don't think so. I mean, give this book a shot. I would say to folks, this is it's definitely, you're supporting a dream here. I think it's definitely enjoyable. It's a very playful, fun, readable kind of book that explores a lot of things that may impact the world. I think there's a lot of ways into this book. It was written for a lot of different people, not just maybe the typical heroes. Yeah, I don't know. Reach out to me. Get a hold of me on Blue Sky if you want to chat about anything, or you read something and you're irritated, and we'll start the conversation.
It's an easy read. I mean, I hate to say it's a beach read, because that sort of implies you think of rom-coms and crime books.
There's some rom in there.
Yeah, there is some rom. And by the way, there's the society and the norms of the society are different than they are now. They're very different. So sex, there's different kinds of sex, perhaps. Anyway, maybe for some of us,
a whole bunch of different kinds. Yeah. Post-human sex for sure. This is a fun topic.
The best kind, right?
When you can change not just your gender, but your full composition and physiology on a daily basis. Then what? How does romance look? What are the limits? Yeah, it's fun. It's just it's exploratory. There's no there's not really a lot of moralizing or judgment in this book about the wide variety of experiences that people have, or just kind of play with it all, see where it sticks, and people can make their own judgments. So.
Yeah, existence is either so bleak or so opulent. There's a little bit in between, but so everything else, nothing else really matters. It's either your survival, or you can do anything you want. But either way, sort of mores and norms, sort of what you would call culture war stuff, is sort of not a thing. Which is interesting, because that's a big message, but it wasn't made in a messagey kind of way. It's just sort of there.
Exactly.
So this is a thinking person's book, but you could read it on the beach. So I definitely say
I like that.
Give it a shot. Yeah, but you can use it. It's great.
Jeff said.
Where can they buy the book?
So it's available through all major retailers, Amazon and Barnes & Noble, I think would be your best bets in the States, for sure. It is available in a lot of indie bookstores if you happen to have any Canadian listeners. It got picked up in a lot of places up here, but...
Sure. I don't know how many Canadian... There are Canadian listeners. Obviously the US is top. I believe the UK fluctuates a lot. And then sort of Australia, but there's countries, and I appreciate them all, but I would never the UAE. I have Singapore, Norway, but Canada is definitely in the top 5 or 6 all the time. I don't pay attention to it because I sort of take it for granted, which is maybe a very American horrible thing to do, is take Canada for granted. But
I hear we're the 51st state.
Well, not yet. The strangest thing is I've spoken to some Canadians who are for that. And I'm really? Listen, it's your country. I don't pretend to know the politics of really most any other country other than this one. But that surprised me. But hey, maybe you know something I don't.
The truth is within. Calm center.
Calm center. Everyone stay calm, chill out, read a book, have some hot chocolate, have some Tim Hortons, have a little bit of maple syrup, watch a hockey game, and chill. All right. So for those of you who are fans of Ryan's and you're following him here, thank you. Welcome. The show is called Garden of Thought. You can find it on any of your major podcast providers. If you subscribe, you're generally going to get 2 or 3 shows a week. And as we sort of alluded to here, some of the shows are going to be like this. Some are going to be, some of them are going to be legal, business, realpolitik, very serious topics, but with a broad-based interest. I hope that's the goal. And others are going to sort of be like the Joe Rogan Show kind of variety, when you put on the Discovery Channel or the History Channel at 7 p.m. and leave it on until 4 a.m., that kind of landscape. Now, trust me, we don't have the other embrace of broness and conspiracy. We certainly don't have the celebrity or success of Joe Rogan, but it's a pretty good example as far as variety is concerned. And then my little guilty favorite is my show where my co-host is a pro wrestler, was PJ Black, who some of you might remember as Justin Gabriel from WWE. John Cena was his wrestling wife for a year. They wrestled each other pretty much all year. And now it's Mr. Thomas from MLW Wrestling. And we talk to people in wrestling and about nonsense like food, sports, non-wrestling things, mythology, paranormal experiences, and a little bit of wrestling too. And almost every show we break news without intending to do so. So check that stuff out. I do some stuff on the Wrestling Soup Network. If you're interested in wrestling, so go check out Wrestling Soup. I'm not going to waste anyone's time here. Otherwise, thank you for being here. You're about to hear the Pixies. Hey, so I'm going to say to guest Ryan Melsom, hey, and thank you for being on the show.
Thank you so much.